Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The movie podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. This week we have 4 brand new films to cover. This week on the Movie Wire, I will be covering the prequel to X, one of the bigger surprise horror films of this year, Pearl. Viola Davis leads a group of brave women warriors in a true story inspired by true events in The Woman King, the new Netflix original dark comedy about 2 teenagers that seek revenge after a video is leaked on social media in Do Revenge. And finally, Prime Video exclusive is the remake of the 2014 Austrian thriller of the same name, starring Naomi Watts in Goodnight Mommy. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows, what? A roar and a burst of flame.
The Movie Wire podcast.
You need people like me.
The Wire.
Pearl is the follow-up prequel from the surprise, thrilling, erotic Taboo X from earlier this year. It follows the story of the intriguing character of Pearl and how she became the vicious killer we saw on screen.
Caring for your family during these times is admirable. But you only get one take at this life.
If only they would just die.
Pardon?
Nothing. I want to be special. Dancing up on the screen like the pretty girls in the pictures.
I will not let you leave this farm again.
I'm worried there may be something real wrong with me. Rumor has it they only take one gal per town.
We're looking for someone with X Factor.
Has to be me.
How about a film nobody else has seen?
Is it legal?
Will be eventually.
I know what I've done. Bad things. Terrible, awful, murderous things. I want to be loved from as many people as possible. But truth is, I'm not really a good person.
Pearl is played by Mia Goth, who played both Pearl and Maxine in the original film. It also comes back to help write the second installment beside Ty West. Pearl takes place in 1918 during the Spanish flu pandemic, where Pearl lives with her mom and her disabled father on the same farm as the first film. Pearl has big dreams on something bigger than just living on the farm with her family. Ty West cleverly uses tones from each era from which the movie takes place, whether that be Pearl or X, to give us a feel of the environment and the time. The two movies in style have their own unique feel. It's like switching from watching Friday the 13th to Leave It to Beaver, then back to Friday the 13th. Teased in the post-credit scenes it was shown exclusively in theaters back in March, X showed a tease of this film, and there is a post-credit scene here as well to advertise the third film in Ti West's X trilogy, entitled Maxine. Director Ti West has an obvious plan for his main characters, and X is used as a baseline hint to what he's trying to accomplish when it comes to his messaging. And Pearl sets the tone for what he's trying to accomplish. It's just not clear quite yet. If you haven't listened to my review of X yet, it is available on episode 15 of The Movie Wire. Now, X served as a surprise to me when it comes to the curiosity of the characters and the raw style of the tone of the movie. And with this being a prequel and an origin story, the film Pearl switches tones to be a more bright and energetic shooting style. Since Pearl is based in 1918, where times were deemed simple and the style of the film helps support this tone, but that's not to say the tone is always bright and the times were as simple as we assume. Ti West cleverly uses the bright tones appropriately and doesn't shy away from using that raw tone that we saw from the first film to show the ugliness, not of the times, but the behavior of the characters during these times. What makes the first film such an interesting watch was our main character, Pearl, played by Mia Goth, the mystery and the peak curiosity that surrounds her on her motivations to kill. X gave such subtle hints that makes the audience create their own origin story of Pearl, and that is brilliant filmmaking. Now we have a movie that somewhat explains how Pearl got to the point of insanity, sent a longing of sexuality, to the point of human suffering. The character of Pearl was a fascinating character study on screen, but what held the first movie back is that it left enough to our imaginations of Pearl to let our imaginations run wild, but not enough to warrant a definition of a character study. They left too much on the table. Pearl is a movie in which relieves us of that thirst to find out what drove our sexually psychotic old lady from X to spiral into insanity and murder. The movie sets the time in a very clever fashion that some can find some common relation to. A time of a pandemic, worry of illness, masks, the beginning of the First World War, and the worry of acceptance and acknowledgement of oneself in society, all without the resources we have today of mental illness. What Ti West does is make an audience compare the times and ask ourselves how different we really are. Even though the amount of resources we have now compared to then is night and day, the questions that arise are simplistic, but though thought-provoking. In 1918, there is a social picture of how we should act in society to gain acceptance. This certainly adds to the mental strain on one's mental state. Now fast forward to 2022. With much resources, we ask ourselves, what led up to needing these resources? Social acceptance has become a pandemic by itself, especially with the youth getting younger and younger as they jump onto social media, without the maturity to fully understand the impact. I'm guessing the next installment of the X trilogy, it follows Maxine since that's the title, and it takes place in the 80s. We will get another taste of his social acceptance thesis, but that's just a guess. The film addresses these situations in equal terror in part to just focusing on what Pearl is capable of. There's a scene where we see Pearl in a 5-minute monologue that she shares almost every thought and emotion that she's kept bottled up, and some can even relate today to some of the emotion, stress, and vulnerability she outputs. This is one of the best scenes of the movie that for just a moment gives us a bit of empathy for Pearl and acts as almost a moment of silence for the individual that could never be herself and feels trapped. The messaging that West delivers isn't overly complicated, and he gives us just enough messaging to not ruin the type of thrill that audiences loved about the first movie. There is a lot to understand about the character of Pearl. Do we get all the answers? No. This is where the movie falls a little short. Pearl feels like we need another prequel to the prequel. My main issue from the first movie was that there wasn't a good balance from knowing too little to knowing too much. We get a little bit more, but we truly don't discover enough to make me satisfied as a prequel or a character study. I get West's messaging, and sure, we can make our assumptions, but we already did that in the first movie. In a prequel entitled Pearl, one would think we would get a bigger explanation. That puts me in the same curiosity state as the first film. But with that said, one can even argue that this is intentional from Ti West to give off the social assumptions or judgments, if you will, that we tend to make in society today. Ti West's main thesis is a fascinating one. And what is clever about the way he goes about to support his messaging is not just with the characters, it's also with the use of setting and lighting and the constant switching between light and dark. By using his lighting strategy, we feel what Pearl is feeling. The complete environment and settings is affected by the way Pearl views the world, and it adds a certain tension to her mental journey. This is brilliant when it comes to how the settings and the environment look. Pearl is a trifecta of great performances, engulfing writing and visuals that attack our psyches and takes us on a journey with Pearl. Between the writing and Mia Goth's performance, I can close my eyes during the entire runtime and just listen and still understand the messaging of the movie, and the performances would have made it seem like I was listening to an old-time radio show. But of course you don't want to do that, because you would miss the fun Ty West has with his retro look in this movie, that you can even tell from watching the trailer that this is a very energetic, bright, confident movie. It's a different, unique take on the thriller horror genre that I haven't seen in a while. Pearl is a different movie than what we saw from X, and if you're expecting some of the same thrills from the first film, you'll be greatly disappointed. I hate that I have to define this movie as horror. It is much more than that, but maybe I'm just reading too much into it, probably more than I should. But this is a film that will have your eyes glued on Mia Goth's on-screen performance and the overall tone of the film. Ty West has gained my attention from his early shorts in VHS, the ABC's of Death segments, and the 2013 film The Sacrament. I cannot wait to see where he goes with the next addition to the X franchise. I'm giving Pearl 3 stars. Now, before we get into the rest of the show, don't forget to check out my reviews for movies that just hit streaming and are available to rent or buy now, including Where the Crawdads Sing, Nope, 3,000 Years of Longing, Thor, Love and Thunder, and Idris Elba in Beast. Now, you can find those reviews on my previous episodes, and just a reminder, if you haven't yet, make sure you hit follow or subscribe, and do me a huge favor and leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at MovieWire Show. Now let's hear from one of my favorite people and my favorite show that you can listen to right now. Let's hear from Josh over at the Talking SMAC podcast.
Do you love comics, movies, video games, and more? We do too. Join me, Josh Scar, and my cast of colorful co-hosts on Talking SMAC. Look for our yellow and red icon on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, and other podcast players.
The Woman King, a historical epic inspired by true events that took place in the Kingdom of Dahomey, one of the most powerful states of Africa in the 18th and 19th century, with an all-female unit of warriors who protected the African kingdom with skills and fierceness unlike anything the world has ever seen.
In my dream as an actor, I dreamed I could be in a movie like this.
To learn that there was this true story, a female army that legit protected their kingdom, that legit beat men. It's like, why didn't I know this when I was a little girl?
They were the ultimate warriors. We fight or we die.
24/7 they trained. That's why they were so good. They outworked everybody. They were stronger, faster, fiercer.
These were women who took great pride in being in this military unit.
They just represented everything heroically badass.
They were fearless. That's what made people revere them.
Before I get into the review, let me just state that this movie is inspired, not based on true events. The reason I bring this up will be clear in my review. It is important to know that the tribe on which this film is about, the Agoji, is an all-female warrior group that did exist and did protect the Kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa. At one point, the warriors grew close to 6,000 members, which is mind-boggling given the times it was based on. But the Kingdom of Dahomey had a very progressive view of women, and the title of this film, The Woman King, it did exist. But the characters of this film are fictionalized and dramatized. Now, this is not to take away from the film's messaging or the point it's trying to make. The most important fact that these incredible warriors existed. It's an important event in our history that should be talked about more. In gender divide, political divide, and the discussions of racial divide, this is an important film to have in our society, now more than ever, to demonstrate the fact that nothing separates us as humans rather than our own moral obligation to humanity, and not from our race, skin color, or the background we come from. The Woman King tells a story inspired again of true events of strong, passionate African warriors, and it does so in a marvelous kind of fashion and pins our heroic women as normal human beings, but their dedication to their people, moral obligations, and the pain and suffering these women have endured. It is a tricky balance to respect these characters and the story without getting distracted by the big budgets, the special effects, or other cinematic distractions that would take away from the powerful story of these true warriors. This is a tall order for director Gina Price Bythewood to accomplish, but what shines through here is her passion, respect, laser focus on the story and its characters. She does a fantastic job at balancing from spectacle to precise focus on the characters in her her own direction. Bythewood has a talent in her films to bring the best out of her cast and ensure the story is told through the characters without all the added fluff. This has to be one of her biggest movies and budgets to work with, and it doesn't convolute her ability to tell a story. This is absolutely impressive to me while watching this movie. The Woman King stars one of my favorite actresses, Viola Davis. I put my film-going experience in her hands whenever I see her name in the credits. Now, if you don't put the DC movies in the mix, she has picked some smart set of films to be part of. But let's be honest, Viola Davis is one of the best parts of some of the DC movies out there. When I see one of her films, I at least know I'm going to get an amazing performance. The Woman King gave me both and more. Not only do we get one of Davis's best performances, and to me, even better than the outstanding performance from her 2016's movie Fences, but even more so, we get a standout performance from Thiso Murdu, who plays young warrior in training Noe, whom I hope we get more of. I will be utterly shocked if we don't see at least one of them come out of Oscar time, even though they both deserve nominations. Both of these talents give the performances of their career and show an incredible amount of humility, but strengthen their performances. As I stated before, the film adds a nice balance between characters and spectacle. Where I found myself wanting more is from the people of Dahomey. I wanted to learn more about this. I wanted to deep dive into the culture, the way of life, and more from the viewpoint of these women warriors. Instead, we get a dramatized subplot that I felt was unnecessary to drive the story without realizing that the characters and culture are interesting by themselves. The film tends to rush itself during the discovery of these characters, and yes, we do learn little things about them throughout the film, but I still wanted more screen time with them to really feel what makes them tick. There are moments in this film that we tend to forget are set in the early 1800s with these characters because the film feels current. The film was written by Dana Stevens, who does a great job with the script, even though the film does feel rushed while we try to learn about these characters, but you can definitely see some of her past handlings of work in this. Her previous works have included 1998's City of Angels, 1999's For Love of the Game, 2002's Life or Something Like It, and 2013's Safe Haven. You see a common theme with the movies I just listed, and unfortunately some of these traits trickle into this movie. The first half of the film feels a little rushed to get through the introductions of the characters, but does a decent enough job of keeping the pacing at first glance. Then you can almost feel that Stevens couldn't help herself. She needed to add something more dramatic in the movie, like she got halfway through the script and felt that it was different than what she's comfortable with or what she's done before, and needed to go back to her dramatic roots, not realizing that these women warriors are good enough. They are good enough to focus on. The characters are good enough to focus on. She is not known for solid character writing, and it shows in this film, from the rushing of the character introduction to the character discovery to throwing in an unneeded subplot when that time could have been spent on building more of an audience relationship with our characters. This is where the film lacks, and given what a character-focused director Bythewood is, it feels a tad unbalanced given the writing and the vision. There are times where we tend to forget that the film is based in the early 1800s. The movie's shooting style and current tone makes us forget that. Polly Morgan, who is a cinematographer in The Woman King, does a great job, especially with a lot of the dark elements in the film, and gets the tone just right. But at the same time, it's almost like she did her job too well. And what I mean by that, we tend to forget we are in the 1800s. It's a good and a bad thing. It's a transport into this world, and it makes us experience it hands-on. But also it can almost make audiences disconnect from the fact these warriors existed. The Woman King is an important film and a key to help inspire, send a message, research, and open up a conversation. The cast is perfection. It looks absolutely stunning. The performances you will see come awards time. I will call it now. But the film misses on a lot of key things. I wanted to know more about the era. I wanted to know more about the culture. I wanted to know, more importantly, a bigger understanding of the characters. And what we're traded with is a subplot that doesn't really add anything more impactful. Knowing the character's story, the struggle, knowing these characters' story to help support the history behind it in a more detailed manner would have given me a more of an emotional attachment. Now, this isn't a bad movie. It's a brilliant movie. There's a lot of great things going for it, but the only thing lingering in my mind is I wish I would have known more. And coming out of a story that's inspired by true events, that's not a feeling you want to feel walking out of a movie. But with that said, it's saved by the solid performances. It's saved by the movie looking beautiful. This movie is an important one, and it's actually a relevant one. And the positives do outweigh the negatives, so I am giving The Woman King 3 stars. Now streaming on Amazon Prime Video, Goodnight Mommy tells the story of twin brothers that arrive at their mother's house after spending time with their father. The twins begin to suspect that something isn't right and the person, in fact, is not their mother.
Mommy? Mom? You're early.
I hate that you have to see me like this, but it's nothing to be afraid of.
Dad didn't say anything.
I was hoping this could be our little secret. What do you think?
What do you think she looks like under there?
House rules. No running or shouting in the house. The barn. And my bedroom. Off limits.
Don't you think something's different? I don't think that's our mother.
Open the door!
You're not our mother.
Say it! You are my mother! You are my mother!
You'll learn to love me someday.
Based on the 2014 film of the same name from Austria, this remake stars Naomi Watts as the mother in question, and Cameron Crovetti and Nicholas Crovetti as twin brothers Elias and Lucas. Now, there are some similarities to the 2014 remake and the 2022 version, but there are also some great differences, such as the 2014 film was well made and a great watch, and the 2022 version is, well, not. It baffles me at times where studios take a foreign film and take everything that made it special and try to put their own spin on it and make it slightly different, but they do it with all the memorable moments and with all the characters that made the original so special in the first place. The original 2014 movie took its time to build the suspense and tension, but in the American version, like with most remakes, it must inject it with speed. The Amazon version of Goodnight Mommy is a generic film with a good concept that came from creators that had an imagination and a sense of style when it comes to being scary. The premise is solid in the original story, and here, where we take two twin boys and put them in what we would think a safe environment, it's another version or rehash of the seclusion formula. This film is a result of what I have talked about on the show with streaming original movies. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of good original movies out there on streaming, but there is a difference between those movies and ones like this. That we take a movie like Goodnight Mommy and put in unexperienced filmmakers and we expect magic in a bottle. And I get the intent, budget reasons, works for both parties to get the IMDb resume up, and putting money in the slot machine and hope to hit the jackpot. But the creators are the key. You take a premise from an already good film and get the green light to remake it only 8 years later. You better have a good plan of attack, clear vision, and a creative team to back it up. It reminds me of Rose, played by Gloria Stewart at the end of Titanic, where she has the heart of the sea diamond and just tosses it in the ocean. The filmmakers in Goodnight Mommy have limited to hardly no experience in building this movie. Let's start with the basics, the design of Mommy. Naomi Watts wears a surgical mask to cover her face. When we first see her appear on screen, the first word that came out of my mouth was laziness. There was no effort from designer Carissa Kelly on the design of this. It doesn't add anything to the sense of danger other than just being a boring beige ski mask. Watching Mother added nothing of wonder or mystery to our main protagonist. The 2014 version got it right, where the design looked to have some sort of effort put into it, where we see her in bandages, and even the bandages simulated a smile to contradict the mother's facial expressions. And I know Amazon, you're strapped for cash, but if you need some money for bandages, email me. I just don't know what the filmmakers were going for when it comes to the design. I can't imagine somebody saying, "Oh man, that looks creepy as hell. That looks great. Oh, I'm not going to sleep at night after seeing this." The design of Mommy does not work. Now, let's go to the second point. The writing is fast-paced and simplistic, which is expected from writer Kyle Warren, who has some writing experience of 13 episodes of the canceled Lethal Weapon series. But I do have to give Naomi Watts credit here. She tries and tries and tries to make something out of this script, but the writing just has her shouting her lines when things get going. By the final act, everybody is shouting their lines, and I wanted to curl up in a ball, cover my ears, and beg for everybody to stop fighting. Goodnight Mommy was directed by Matt Sobel, whose only directorial credit was the 2015's Take Me to the River, and is way over his head on this one. Though he produces some okay moments in this film, he took away anything that gets us to care about what happens. He utilizes many repeat shots that feels repetitive, and it comes across as reading a syllabus to a high school class. Sobel just seems like he's checking off boxes as he goes along while shooting this movie, and he's using shots he's comfortable using over and over and over again. This again takes away from the suspense of the film, when we see the same shots and situations repeatedly. The one thing this film has going for it is the twins Cameron Crevetti and Nicholas Crevetti, who come across a lot more likable on screen, and their behavior is believable in the first half of the movie. Their performance added a mysterious but innocent curiosity. Unfortunately, the dialogue seemed rushed and didn't utilize the twins on screen's likability to its advantage. The biggest thing that the original had going for it is that it was a slow burn. It took its time building its suspense in a quiet way. It didn't make things predictable as it could have. This movie version is a generic feel, predictable outcome, and the climax is rushed and chaotic. It's yet another generic straight-to-streaming flick that will be forgotten the very next day, and it doesn't reward its audience for sitting through this absolute mess. You will shrug your shoulders by the time the credits roll. Goodnight Mommy comes across as filmmakers punching the clock to just collect the paycheck. If you have seen the 2014 version, you have seen the best version. This movie is an insult to the original material and a cookie-cutter version that is utter laziness. I'm giving Goodnight Mommy 1 star. It gets so hard to keep track and even have time to read all the trending topics on the web. Now there's a new app to help with all of those problems. Newsly is an audio app for iOS and Android. It picks up web articles about the most trending topics on the web at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice. For the first time in the history of the internet, the entire web becomes listenable. Browse articles from topics you choose and start playing. You can follow any topic as specific as you like, from sports, science, to Bitcoin. You can even follow Kardashian. It will find you the latest articles and read them to you out loud. And guess what? They have podcasts as well. Explore trending podcasts from over 50 countries. The Movie Wire is now a featured podcast on the Newsly app. Download and use Newsly for free now. The link will be in the description of this episode. You can also use one of my promo codes that you will find in the description as well to get you a 1-month free premium subscription. Stop scrolling, start listening, download Newsly today. Do Revenge is a new Netflix original black comedy directed by Jennifer Caton Robinson and Celeste Ballard, and stars Camila Mendez and Maya Hawke, who play two teenagers who team up to take down the high school biggest bullies.
He's a fake woke, misogynist hypocrite. He'll never get away with this.
Don't you want to make her pay? I want to burn her to the ground. Is do revenge even like correct grammar?
I'm sorry, Schoolhouse Rock. Are you dragging my sentence structure right now?
Now, Do Revenge is one of those films I had to watch multiple times to understand what the filmmakers were going for. After a first-time viewing of this movie, my review wouldn't have ended well. But after the first viewing, I found myself thinking more and more about it. After 24 hours, I decided to try again, and this time I found myself pausing more often and taking notes. Now, this does not mean it's a good thing, but it's a start. There are moments in this movie that are so over the top and cliche, it had me rolling my eyes for most of the movie during the first viewing. After the second time around, my eyes stayed more glued on the screen. And taking you through the journey of my first viewing, I couldn't tell if this was a satire of a high school revenge theme, or if it's trying to pass itself off as a legitimate high school revenge story. And still, I have a question mark out on this one. For one, the cast is way too old to legitimately be playing high school students, and usually this is the case in a lot of the Hollywood high school films, but this is extremely noticeable on how old these actors and actresses are, especially by Maya Hawke, who plays Eleanor, and Austin Abrams, who plays the high school dreamboat and bully Max. There are moments in the movie that are more obvious than not, and you can tell most of the cast are trying their best to mimic their high school selves, but it shows that they're just out of practice when it comes to how high school students act. Watching this film reminded me of watching the Hulu original comedy Pen 15, about the story of middle school girls seeing through two 7th grade girls dealing with the awkwardness of being a teenager. Only the two 7th grade teenagers are played by 35-year-old actresses. That was part of the comedy. This movie has a very talented cast, but the audio just doesn't match the video in what we are viewing on screen. When Do Revenge goes after the typical revenge storyline and my mind starts to wander, the film pulls out of its many energetic songs and the cast seems to have some fun with it. This makes our characters come out of their shell and you can tell the cast is having fun with these moments. And in return, we have fun with it. It reminds me of a bunch of adults in their late 20s when they hear songs from their high school years come... Oh wait, that's right. Our cast is in their late 20s. No wonder the cast looks like they're having the time of their lives. These are the moments that are the most believable from our cast. They're having fun because these songs are from their era. The music inclusion in this film is by far the most memorable piece of the movie, not just because of the actual music itself, but what director Jennifer Caton Robinson does with it. The music and shots are recycled from other films, but there is added sense of energy about them that boomerangs the viewer's interest back into the movie, and that is mainly due to the lighting and color contrast from the costume design that brings the music scenes to life. Earlier in this episode, I go on a rant about the Prime Video remake of Goodnight Mommy about not having the right people for the right roles in the filmmaking process. Now, I'll give Netflix a little bit of credit on this. They do things the way it should be. We have some talent on this film that matches the type of movie it's trying to create, between the technical aspects to the tone of the movie. And you can see the creative team's talent and experiences shine in this film, and some of it works and some of it absolutely flops. For example, let's take the director and writer of Do Revenge, Jennifer Caton Robinson, who only has one other directorial credit to her name, but she's also helped write Thor: Love and Thunder, which wasn't a great movie, but you can see the color style and the sarcastic humor in her work in this movie. We also have Celeste Ballard, who helped write this film as well, who wrote the 2021 Space Jam Legacy with a familiar tone in this movie as well. And this is the film's strong point besides the killer soundtrack. Its use of colors to complement the scenes, and it reminded me of Thor: Love and Thunder. Now let's get into the second viewing. The second viewing, I appreciated this film a little bit more. My mindset went in a different direction. I treated it more as a satire than trying to take itself too seriously. By doing that, it took away a lot of what the film does not make clear, of what it wants to be. And that's the main problem here with Do Revenge. It doesn't go far enough to be actual satire of high school revenge, and I had to force myself to think it is. The film comes across like it actually wants to take itself seriously and be a legitimate high school revenge film. And as an audience, just like in high school, we are secretly talking behind its back. Do Revenge has its moments, and when these moments hit, they are memorable. But everything else about the film is bits and pieces of other movies such as Cruel Intentions, Mean Girls, She's All That, Jawbreakers, all thrown into a blender and spilled on screen. But at least if I have to view it a third time, I can close my eyes and listen to the killer music as a blast from the past from my high school years. But instead of watching the movie again, I might just listen to the soundtrack and open up my old yearbook. I'm giving Do Revenge 2 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. Again, thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram and Twitter and leaving me a review. Until next week, do me a favor and make sure you stay for after the credits of a film to show your support. They put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film, and make sure you support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at Movie Wire Show, or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.